Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 15.
Episode 15. Remember we talked about last time with volume levels in the car? Some people are
Yeah,
really going to like 15 because it ends in 5, and other people are going to like it because it's the product of two primes. So
I
whatever
do.
your flavor.
I do set my volume level to 15 sometimes.
You texted me deliberately saying that you don't do any of the volumes.
You know what? You've got me thinking about it now, and I'm wondering if our listeners are the same. Now that you've talked about this, I can't stop thinking about it. Every time I set the volume on my car, I'm conscious of what number it is instead of just whether or not it's too loud or not.
Got you. Now you're going to be sucked in forever. You're one of the people that are part of the
Oh
problem.
my gosh, Josh. Well, while I'm complaining about things, I want to rant about something for a minute. Can I do that?
Absolutely. This is why we have a podcast.
That's exactly why we have a podcast. So I have a checkbook sitting on my dresser that was. I can tell from the address on the top of it that it was when I lived in Florida. I lived in Florida in 2005. So the last time I ordered checks was 2005, and I'm right about to where I'm about to write the last check out of this checkbook. And I am really, really hoping I cannot order another checkbook ever again after this. And it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. And the problem is our education system.
Oh, hang on. No, all right. Before we dive into the problem with the public education system in America, because wow, that's a leap. We need to talk about what are you still writing checks for?
Yeah, I'm writing check. I'll tell you, I write checks for three things right now: school activities, the DMV, and my kid's piano teacher, who's like 90 years old.
School activity. The last time I was at a school activity, they had the PTA association had the square on their phones. Like you could run the card.
I know, right? You could do QR codes and whatever, PayPal. No, like for instance, my daughter did this after school running club, and they'll only take a check.
That seems fishy almost. It's like
I know, right?
it's like asking for cash only. It's like, oh
It's
yes, you
making
can
me
donate to the
crazy.
school, cash only.
Because and somehow I'm the crazy one if I'm like, what are you talking about? Writing a check? Like, hello, it's 2020. Back to the Future was 6 years ago. Hey, buddy, thumb $100 to save the clock tower. Like, can we get in the future yet?
I feel like you wouldn't be wrong that if you were someplace like, oh, will you give money to this thing? And you said, yes, I absolutely will. And they say, great, make the check out too. And you said, oh, never mind, I changed my mind. I feel like you're totally justified. If you only take checks, you should be expecting to get turned down.
So I sent these guys a snarky email about it, and they sent me a reply and says, well, if you don't like a check, you can call up and read us your credit card number over the phone. Like, if there were anything you could do that sounds as antiquated and backward as writing a check, that is it.
I'm surprised they didn't want you to telegram your credit card number.
Pony Express silver certificates.
What company is this asking for checks only?
Oh my gosh, I don't want to name them. And it's not just one. Like this is, I'm running out of checks.
This must be an East Coast problem because we're over here. I guess we're living in the future in Arizona because
ignoring daylight savings time and not writing checks.
Well, I'm sitting ignoring daylight savings time. I'm sitting over here at my desk, and I realize this is the drawer where we have our checks, and I'm going to open it because,
let's see how long ago it was since you got new checks printed.
Okay. Oh, this was okay. So this wasn't too bad. This actually brings up a funny story. So these checks were, wow, these are actually really recent. These checks are no more than 3 years old because this is our latest address, our last address in Arizona. Yeah, so these have to have been after.
So what do you write checks for then?
We don't. Here's the thing: there was a period where we kept ordering new checks because our bank, who I will not name and almost did, refused to put Nicole's new last name on them. Like we would get these checks, and I have the check in my hand that I could show to you. And it says my full name and then her full name with her maiden last name on the check. And at this point, like I said, this check has to have been ordered after 2013. At that point, we'd been married for 3 years. Like, she had not been, like, her last name for that long.
So I ranted about this on social media, and I got kind of a whole spectrum of responses. There's some people that were likewise outraged as me that they still have to write checks. I had a couple of people like, "What? I haven't written a check in 20 years," which is what I wish I could be saying right now. But I noticed that the ones who said that don't have kids in school. So there's something about that.
Oh, is that just your correlation? You immediately that's
Yeah.
the first criteria. That's the first box that you put
Everything I
people should
do
be
that
into.
has a check has something to do with kids in school.
No, I was more talking about this is the first level of categorization of people in your life: people with kids in school, people without kids in school.
Huh. Whether or not you've written a check in the last 20 years. Anyway, so I'm interested to hear what our audience's experience are. So if you guys have anything to add about how you feel about checks, what you use instead, what you would do in this situation, interested to hear your opinion.
I'm 100% on your side. Like, if I'm in the grocery store, like with my groceries on
my
the conveyor
gosh.
belt, and somebody in front of me pulls out the checkbook,
Gets out a
I
checkbook.
actually start putting groceries back into my cart. Like, I will go to the next one over. This will be faster.
I'll take my groceries off the conveyor belt if someone starts writing a check.
No, yeah. Then the worst is like if she's writing a check. Oh wait, did you get all my coupons? And then pull them out of her purse. I would just leave.
Oh,
I would just
man.
leave all my stuff there and be like, you know what? You can have all this stuff. I'm out of here.
I'll just reshop.
Yeah, not my day at the grocery store. We'll try again tomorrow.
So I want to hear this story about your new desk chairs.
That's what I was just going to launch into. All right, so many viewers may have seen that I built a new computer recently. That computer is banging. I love it to death.
You can watch the video of Josh building the computer on our YouTube channel, Bad at Magic.
And we're bad at YouTube videos too, so it's not as long as it. Never mind. I'm not going to complain about it. I built a computer, and it's awesome, and I love it to death. It is actually not the computer that I'm recording on, because it is not the computer that is set up in my pillow fort for recording. But anyway, we built a whole new desk for it inside, so I can actually work on my computer in the house. And as a part of that, we didn't have any good chairs to go with it. We had like Nicole's cast-off old office chair that was one of those exercise balls chairs.
Okay,
So
yeah,
like
that one was in the photo you took of making the computer, and a lot of people commented on the exercise ball chair.
Yes, which was not my chair, but I gladly sat in it because it was the only chair that fit under that desk for 2 weeks. So we had to
Okay.
order new chairs. So Nicole and I went through the whole process, and I think Family Guy said it best when they said, real stores suck. So we just looked on Amazon and online for different chairs and found a style that we like, and then dialed it into, these ones are decently priced, they look okay, and it's on Amazon Prime, so we get them shipped for free.
Now, did you have to find some kind of special specification so that it would fit underneath your custom desk you built there in the kitchen?
No, so actually the desk is a little bit lower than the counter, but it ends up being like almost perfectly like what a normal desk height would be. There's just some structure underneath it that's a little deeper than you would expect, like for a desktop. So it's probably, I think a normal desk is like 32 inches, I want to say off the top of my head.
So ordering online wasn't going to be a huge problem.
No, not a huge problem. And the chairs that we got, they don't fit all the way underneath it, like I said, because of that extra structural stuff. But they're the way that they're designed, they tuck underneath it enough that they're well out of the way, and so they work really well.
Okay.
Here's the problem. We order everything on Amazon Prime. Like, I'm surprised that there's not just an Amazon truck that just comes to our house every other day with all of our stuff.
I know.
Like just a dedicated van.
Last time I came and visited you, there was like a stack of collapsed Amazon boxes. It looked, like half the Amazon rainforest.
I may have been able to build my son a full suit of armor for a Nerf gun fight out of Amazon boxes, but that's a story for another day.
And that's why you're able to hide his bicycle in the garage for 2 months, because he's not suspicious of a whole bunch of boxes.
Exactly. Like if your garage is already full of cardboard, then it's just more noise.
Right.
You're sidetracking me. Don't Amazon Prime shame me here, Ben. So anyway, we get a lot of stuff from Amazon, and usually they just drop it off like in front of the house, right? And luckily we're in a neighborhood, I guess, or we're just in a part of the country, or we're just super lucky and we have a really deep front door that people can't see the packages, but we don't get a lot of porch pirates.
Right.
So I can't remember the last time we got something stolen, and if it was stolen, it was something inconsequential. So you're really
We
playing.
had some porch pirates. We had my wife's sister for Christmas, and we sent her a box full of children's books, and it got stolen. I wonder what those guys did with it when they opened it up and it was just children's books.
We can
Instead of, like an iPad or something.
So there's a spectrum of responses to that. There is we shouldn't have taken this, and then they donate it to their nearest charity. And then there's the other end of, haha, we really screwed over some kid's Christmas.
What is that? Chaotic neutral?
And the other end of the spectrum is they tore the pages out and used it to roll their drugs or whatever.
Oh, man. Okay, so you weren't worried about your office chair getting stolen?
Not at all. But and Amazon is pretty good about just dropping it off on the porch. Like, they just leave it there. Like, we get the picture. Like, hey, the blurry picture that's clearly the phone is already moving away, like going into their truck. Anyway, but this time I come home expecting the chairs to be there, and there's a sticky note on the window next to the door instead. And it's a little is a FedEx tab. It's like, oh crap, FedEx is delivering, not the Amazon guy. And it said, you weren't here. Nobody was home, so we're going to try again tomorrow. And this was Wednesday.
Okay.
Like, yeah, FedEx. Nobody was there because it's noon on a Wednesday, and we both work. And then, of course, what time did they come the next day, Ben? Did they
noon on a Thursday.
They came at 11:30 on Thursday.
Yeah.
And so this time I'm like, okay, there's got to be something we can do about this because this is ridiculous. And so
this is going to come up later, but this is the definition of insanity: doing the same thing and expecting a different response.
Well, and I get it. Like, it's just that's where he's at in the route. Like, so yeah, he would have to go through major hassle to like rearrange the route to drop it off.
So
at
what
a
happened?
time.
Like the company that shipped it, checked the box of like signature required or something.
And that's the thing. Like, they didn't say anything. It was just a tab like, we missed you. We'll try again tomorrow. But on the back of it, it said, oh, if this box is checked, then just sign it and leave the signature here, and then we can leave the package. But the box wasn't checked. But I thought maybe I could outsmart this guy. So I checked the box, and then I signed the slip. And then the little section where it said...
That was your first mistake right there.
Well, the little section where it says special instructions, I said, I didn't say, like, we're not going to be home all day every day because that's just asking to get robbed. But I'm like... just leave the box. Like, just leave it. It's fine. I authorize you.
Okay, no one's going to steal an office chair off my front porch. You can't even see it from the road.
Right. I get it's a big, but just leave it there. Just leave it. And so then Friday, I come home, and what do I come home to? But a slip attached
note
to my slip that says, like, no note. There's no note. It's just a slip attached to my slip that said, nobody was home. We're trying again tomorrow. And, like, you saw my note.
Tomorrow meaning Saturday this time.
This time I called. Like, I called them, like, the carrier or whoever. I'm like, hey, like, what's going on? Am I going to get this thing? Like, oh, yeah, don't worry. You get one more chance before we send it back to the warehouse or wherever. We send it back to the shipper.
What if they'd started trying on a Tuesday?
Right? But this is the thing. They said, like, okay, we're going to drop it off tomorrow. Okay, great. Tomorrow is Saturday. We will be home, but there is a window of 1.5 hours where we are at karate and then gymnastics kind of crushed together across the street. It takes both parents because the things overlap.
Right.
And it's like they said, so what time is he going to be here? Oh, well, according to his route, he'll be there between 10 in the morning and 8 at night.
Let me guess. That's your window. What? What the heck kind of window is that?
All right. But I'm thinking, okay, so karate starts at 10:30.
Comcast cable doesn't give windows that broad.
Karate starts at 10:30 and gymnastics is over at noon. So of that giant window they gave, only a tiny portion of it is overlapping with where we won't be there. So I think
you get the office chair or not?
I'm not there yet. So we go to these little events and we come home like, okay, we got to get back. So like we came straight back, and what's on my door? But another one of the freaking FedEx stickies. Like, did you come straight to my house? But I look at this sticky's a little different because he actually wrote something on it. I'm like, oh, maybe he'll let me sign for it this time. And I look on the back and it said like, oh, I'm in the neighborhood for a couple hours. Give me a call, Rob, and then a cell phone number.
What?
Yeah,
that can't be SOP.
Which, whatever, I'm fine. If this guy's going to go out of his way to make employee of the month, like I'm giving him 5 stars. Anyway, so I call him in a blind panic, like, Rob, are you still here in Anthem? He's like, oh, yeah. I'm Josh Fleshman. I live at this address. You were delivering a couple of chairs and a big box. Like, oh, yeah. No problem. I remember. Are you familiar with Anthem? He tells me. And I go, yes, I live here. I am familiar with Anthem. Where are you? And he goes, oh, well, I'm over, like, in the neighborhood. If you go down, like, that street. Like, I'm not censoring the street names anymore. Like, these are the directions that he's giving me. Like, I'm off in the neighborhood, like, over that way.
This is actually how specific Rob was being.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, I'm trying to, like, narrow him down. Like, all right, is there a school over there? It's like, yeah, I just drove by a school. Okay. And then in my mind, there's only 3 schools in Anthem. What color was the school, Rob? It's like, well, the buildings were gray, but the fence was brown. Okay, he's over off of Memorial.
Why are you having this conversation? You're making me crazy just repeating this.
Yeah, but I don't want them to ship my freaking chairs back to,
Right.
Indonesia or wherever these things were made. So, like, this is on me. Like, I need to go get this package. It's like, okay, so I have a good idea of where you are. I'm going to come to that neighborhood, and I'll call you again when I get closer, and then we'll figure it out. And he's like, okay, yeah, sounds good. And so then at this point, like, we had just gotten back from all these events, and Nicole's taking care of the kids, and so I went straight into my truck and left. And I had to call her pulling out of the driveway, and she like answered like, what? Because she thinks I'm calling from like the living room. And I was like, I'll just let you know I'm not there. Like, I left. So that was funny. She's like, wait, what? And I hung up on her because I've got to call Rob back. And so then I get to the neighborhood and I call Rob and we figure out where he is. He says, okay, I just went down this road. Like, I'm going to come back there in a minute after I make a couple of deliveries. Like, okay, I will park at this corner and I will sit there and wait for you. I'm in a white Ford truck. Like, what are you driving? He's like, oh, I'm in a Sprinter van. Ben, do you know what a Sprinter van is?
Yeah, they're like a really tall Mercedes van.
Okay, well, I didn't know what a Sprinter van was.
Okay.
So I asked, like, so yeah, I get it's a delivery van. Does it have like FedEx on the side? He's like, oh no, it's just all white. Like, okay, well, whatever. It's one of those rental things. You know how they do? They surge the delivery guys. Anyway, so I sitting there, and then I see the Sprinter van coming, and I see the driver doing that thing where he's leaning real close to the steering wheel, like staring out, like looking at me, and I waved at him, and like, oh, he waved back, and he pulls over. And so I get out of my truck. I'm like, finally, I did it. I got these chairs, despite every effort of FedEx to ship them back to where they came from. And then Rob gets out. He's like, you're Josh Fleshman? I'm like, yes, that's me. He's like, great. Do you have ID? I'm like, I do have ID because I thought of that before I left. And I showed him my driver's license. He's like, perfect. Can you sign this? I can. I signed the thing. And he hands me an 8.5 by 11 brown envelope. There you go.
What?
And I take it into my hands and I'm like, oh.
Can you...
Was
these are my office chairs that we talked about on the phone?
This is the package, and he goes, no, I'm just screwing with you, and he takes the envelope back and throws it back in his van, and like, floored me. I was like, you got me. That was really good,
awesome.
Rob. Yeah,
well
you
done,
got me.
Rob in the white Sprinter.
Yeah, and then he opened the van, and then there was a big old box with chairs in it, and yes, that worked out perfectly.
Okay.
So yes, I did. I got the chairs. They're inside. They're great.
Hey, who are these people that can afford to live in Anthem that are sitting around at their house at noon on a Wednesday, Thursday, and a Friday?
I blame I don't know. This is something that Nicole is particularly pet peevish about, is there are all these functions, especially schools. Like the elementary schools are really bad about having cool, fun functions for the kids and for the family members to come at like 2 o'clock on a Thursday. And it's like... I get it. People are available, and it's convenient
for the professionals.
It's convenient for the school. It's convenient for the teachers and the kids. But for the families that have 2 working adults, like, you're kind of making us look like bad parents here. And that's your logistics, not our inability to be with our kids.
All right. Well, speaking about bad at parenting, I want to talk about and large round numbers that are multiples of other prime numbers. I want to talk about 50th anniversaries.
All right, so I know you're old, Ben, but it can't possibly have been 50 years since
No, I've not been married for 50 years. My wife's parents, on the other hand, this year is the year of their 50th anniversary. So my wife's little sister lives with her parents, but we're the right choice to help plan the 50th wedding anniversary party. So Alicia got on, a group chat with all of her 4 siblings and said, hey, we need to plan a big shindig for mom and dad this year because they're celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, which is a big deal.
Right.
So I had this flashback in my head of a bad experience I'd had with the 50th anniversary. So in 2013, I was stationed in Italy at the place, that I talked about in episode 9 when I told you about the Italian job.
Go listen to the Italian Job, people. It's awesome.
Yeah, episode 9, the Italian job. What had happened is that we were a tenant unit on an Italian base. It was an Italian fighter wing with an Italian wing commander and several thousand Italians, and then a little detachment of 100 Americans that had a very specific mission. And so we were there on that base, and the history of our mission there was that there had been Americans on that base doing that exact mission since 1963, which made the year 2013 the 50th anniversary of that relationship.
What possibly could have been put into Italy in 1963 that's still relevant today?
Yeah, I'm sure you can figure that out.
We'll start a Reddit discussion about it or something. Go ahead.
So, we got a committee together to basically say, hey, this relationship with the Italians is important, and like any long-term relationship, it's going to continue to be important, you have to do maintenance. So because it's the 50th anniversary coming up next year, let's get a committee together and start planning some activities. We'll have a formal dinner. We'll generate some memorabilia. We'll have an open house, all these things. Who wants to be on the committee? And I was all about it. I thought, this sounds cool. I'll get involved with this. Let's celebrate with the Italians.
For all of our non-military listeners that might be thinking about this and they really got their stuff together. No, this is what's called an opportunity to pad a resume. The entire idea of having this 50th anniversary thing, yeah, that sounds good. That it was we got to keep this relationship with the Italians. BS, Ben. This was to pad out what would otherwise be a very inconsequential, a very dull, and very monotonous set of performance reports for everybody that was involved with this whole process for a whole year.
So I won't deny that that's a good portion of it. Since everyone there was on 2-year tours, it's not like you've been around long enough that you feel this great sense of loyalty and long-term relationship. You come, you're there for 2 years, and you go. And they've since increased it to 3 years, but still, it's a very short-term relationship for any one set of people. But as I got on this committee and started doing things, we basically went and looked up past commanders and started interviewing them on what the unit was like 10, 20, and 30 years ago. And man, I had some really cool experiences. We had this one past commander come down to the base and sit down with me and talk to us about what it was like there 30 years ago. And he told me some just doozies of a story about stuff they'd done and what it was like and the crazy wild west old days of doing that mission there. It was nuts. So where I'm going with all this is you are right in that a lot of people look at this as something extra to do. Well, we planned a formal dinner with the Italians, and the Italian wing commander came. I think they invited the mayor from the local town, and we had little memorabilia coins, and we participated in some very nice traditional feeling things. And it felt like it really was being valued by the Italians and the Americans that were there at the time as a celebration of a very, a mutual relationship for a very long time. And the Italians more so than us, because some of them, unlike us that move around every 3 or 4 years, there's some of them that had spent their entire career there. So they'd been there for 20 years.
Wow.
And they had seen lots of Americans come and go, but to them it was actually kind of meaningful. So what happened is towards the end of the year that we'd celebrated the anniversary, we'd done most of the events, and we were planning an open house. We were going to get, a static display of one of the Italian jets and bring the fire engine down, invite all the families on the base and come talk about what we did and stuff. Well, about the same time as we were starting to plan this open house event, we were going to invite the local community and everyone, started getting points of contact and setting up booths and all those kinds of things. We had a series of inspections related to our operational mission. You have one that's done internally where you inspect yourself, and then you have another where an external organization that isn't the final inspector comes and validates what you've done, and then you have the final inspection, each separated by about a month time period. It's very routine to do this kind of thing with this kind of mission. So what had happened is the open house was supposed to happen between 2 of the inspections.
That's risky, because if you're going to get everything squared away for the inspection, and then basically turn it all over and dump out all the pieces again, and then try to put it back together before the last one. So your commander then is in a tricky spot. Do I
You got it.
guarantee that I'm going to get like perfect marks on this inspection that could seriously negatively impact my career? So there's the negative consequences of potentially like getting a downgrade on the inspection versus the extra not required brownie points that he would earn by having this extra event.
You nailed it. Now, I want to pause for a second because I think this, on an organizational level, is an exact replica of what happens in people's personal lives in the military.
Okay.
Imagine you're a father, you're going along, you're doing your operational mission, there's something that seems really important, and you decide to miss your own anniversary or your child's sports game.
So that's what this is really about. Is so which anniversary did you skip with Felicia?
No.
Just do a normal work day.
No. I'm saying this was this exact dilemma was happening on an organizational level. That's a replica of the same thing that happens on a personal level.
Okay.
Something important came up at work on your wife's anniversary, and you have to decide: do I stay at work and take care of the important thing, or do I blow off work per se and take care of the anniversary and hope the work will be okay?
Listen, Ben, missions come and go, but Italy's always going to be there for you.
Yeah, that's what they say, and then you get served divorce papers. So it's important to understand that this had reached the point of preparation where canceling it wasn't going to be a simple thing. Like, we were going to have to like run a cancellation in the paper kind of thing. You know, enough people had been notified it was happening that canceling it wasn't just in the planning stages.
Did anybody at any point ask to delay the inspection a week?
No. That it's just like you said. My commander, and when he imagined in his head going to his group commander and saying, "Boss, can we delay the inspection week?" and he says, "What for?" and he says, "Well, we're having a 50th anniversary party with the Italians." He's imagining the boss going, "Uh-huh," and then getting out his little red book and writing his name down in the crap list.
Boss, listen, I know this presentation tomorrow is super important, but it's my anniversary, so I'm going to go. It's like, then that's fine. You can do that, but you're not a team player, and I'm going to remember that.
Yes. Now, here's the thing. There was enough flex both ways that it really wasn't clear what to do. Like,
you could just try to do both, try to have your cake and eat it too?
Yes. So, here's what happened. I'm surprised I haven't told you this story before. So my commander calls a meeting where he brings all the senior NCOs and the officers in a room together. Just like he did when he was looking for volunteers for the summary courts officer for the death of William Capella, Italian Job, episode 9. Check it out. So he brings us all in a room and he lays all this out. He's like, "Look, we got the open house coming up. We're already invited the community and all that stuff, but we just had this inspection and we got a few items, and if these don't get closed out before the next inspection and we get dinged on them and they start looking into why, and it's because we had a giant party, it's not going to be good." So he said, "Everybody tell me what you think." And he wait.
This is
okay.
all right. I'm interjecting right here. This
Go
is
ahead.
this is the second time this guy has done something that is completely counter against what I think a good military commander is supposed to be. Gets everybody in rooms like, "All right, everybody, sit down. I have a tough decision to make, and I don't want to make it, so I'm going to farm it all out."
No. Well, okay, so he told us. I couched it wrong. He says, "I'm thinking of canceling the anniversary party."
Okay,
the open house.
This is more of this is what
Give
we're
me
supposed to
your
do.
objections.
Change my mind.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the way he couched it.
Got it.
And he started going around the room, and something weird was happening because I thought he was trying to make an informed decision, and so he was looking for inputs on both sides so that he could just have all the information.
I'm shaking my head.
You're
No,
shaking your head. No.
Yeah. No, that's not what.
So you recognize this, okay? I was watching this happen where everyone started falling like dominoes. Everyone recognized the writing on the wall. They all saw that the boss wanted to cancel the party, and he wasn't asking whether or not he should do it. He was saying, "How should we cancel the party?"
The boss was basically couching it as like, "I'm making a really unpopular decision, but we're going to discuss it in a way that makes you realize why I'm doing it, so I don't seem like such a bad person."
Yes. So when he got to me, I'd failed to recognize that.
Ben, like, all of your stories are about, like, there's all these things happening, and I just totally missed it, and I was my normal perky self and totally screwed everything up.
Yeah. So, yeah. So I thought he wanted some information on the other side. So I was if this were back to a personal scenario, if this were someone saying I'm going to miss my wife's 20th the dinner I'd planned with my wife for our 20th wedding anniversary because this thing happened on the flight line, give me reasons I shouldn't. I thought he was asking for that information. So he went around the room. Everyone was just yes, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. And they got to me and he says, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, sir, let me tell you. I've been on the committee. I've been engaged in all this planning. This is not a free decision. There's going to have some impact." And I listed off a few things that I thought would be negative repercussions of doing this. And then I assured him that I thought we could do both. I said, I think we can still have this party. We can still do the inspection. Everything will be fine, and it won't cost us all of this. It won't hurt our relationship as much.
Oh man, but now you're the guy though. You're the guy in the commander's head. Like, he's gonna get blamed if something gets taken on the inspection, but he's gonna, like, it's gonna be, that crap's gonna roll downhill to you because, like, you know what, that Ben Rich guy, he said we could do it. I believed him. That jerk.
So he stopped the meeting and he lit me up.
Oh no!
Like what? Okay, I have never said I've never used this phrase on the podcast before, but I want to introduce it now so I can use it in the future. It's a leadership style I call "Why do you hate nuclear surety?" Okay. It's a very lazy leadership style, and it's, instead of actually addressing something and talking about the actual pros and cons of it, you just assume that your default decision is the only right answer, and anything else is insurrection.
Ben, go watch Fox News for 10 seconds. It's like, oh, well,
Yeah.
I think we need stronger gun control laws. Why do you hate freedom? It's like,
right. Why do you hate freedom?
Hey,
exactly.
Hang on a second.
Yes. So why do you hate nuclear surety? And that was what it was. It was the four-finger point. It was the how dare you? Like, and I wasn't disrespectful. I didn't tell him I thought he was making the wrong decision. I just thought I was giving him information on the other side of the equation so he could make an informed decision. So I didn't fight him. Like, I didn't argue back or anything like that. I just got yelled at in front of everyone. They all were looking at the ground like, "Oh, Ben, you idiot. You should have known better than this." And these are my friends, but they're not going to stand up for me in this kind of situation. They're going to let me take it.
Yeah, that's what
so he gets all done. He's like, anyone else? And everyone, of course, there was no one else after that. And he's like, "Okay, we're canceling the thing. Everybody go cancel it and go back."
Oh, sir, I do
and then
have
he says,
one
"Ben,
last...
can I see you in my office?"
Sir, I do have one last point. If you're going to cancel it anyway, why did you even have this meeting?
Yeah. So he calls me into his office. I think he chatted with a few people. And by the time he walked in there, he kind of looked at me and he sighed and he goes, "I probably overdid it on you in there." I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "You were just trying to give me the other side of the argument, weren't you?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Sorry. Are we done here?"
Oh, for God's sake. That's the freaking worst. It's like, well, I acknowledge that I made you look like a complete and total ass in front of all of your peers, but I'm not man enough. I don't have the stones to actually admit that in front of those same people. Yeah. So I'm just gonna meekly apologize to you, and then we'll pretend it never happened, and we're still cool, right? What a jerk.
Okay, but you and I have both seen the entire spectrum of leaders, and there are most of people who would treat us like you did in the conference room who would never apologize ever under any circumstances.
That's also true.
I got to give him credit for at least doing it in private.
You are just too freaking nice to stomach sometimes, Ben.
Okay.
It's like this guy tore me up and down in front of all my peers and made me look like a terrible military leader, but he wasn't such a bad guy. It's like, really?
But it didn't bug me that much. His apology to me in private was sufficient. I was okay with that because he acknowledged that he understood that I understood the situation and just misread his intent.
Hey, so your apology is great, but can you pry these nails out of my hands from the cross so I can get down and go home?
So here's the thing. We canceled the open house, and I don't know the impact of that. What is the impact of missing one of your kids' soccer games or missing your wife's birthday or missing, what does that mean to the relationship between the Americans and the Italians? It's the fact that it's so hard to understand the impact of any one decision like that. That's the reason that we tend to err on the side of canceling those kinds of events.
Well, I mean, it's because it's fine and there is no visible repercussions right up to the point where your wife murders you in your sleep.
Or you get served divorce papers.
Yeah,
And I don't know
exactly.
what that looks like with the Italians, but I do know what it's like when the Italians like you and they're trying to help you, and when you need them to like bring you a backhoe to help dig a trench to lay some cable or something like that, and they show up the next day versus they make it take 6 months.
You have the most ridiculous stories because I know you didn't just make up that example.
Yeah,
Yeah, that happened to you, right? Is that what you're saying?
yeah,
You
exactly.
had to randomly borrow an Italian backhoe.
Yeah, and if you have a good relationship, they treat you like someone with a good relationship, just like a spouse. And if you have a bad relationship, they treat you like someone with a bad relationship.
You just gave me
So,
an excellent piece of intel for later on in this podcast. I'm going to see if I can remember it.
okay.
I'm going to write this down.
So I told you all that. So back to my in-laws' 50th wedding anniversary this year. So when my wife comes to me and says, "Hey, it's my parents' 50th anniversary this year. We need to plan a party," my brain instantly flashed back to Getty Air Base, 2013, and I thought we need to make this important. Like, we can't let other things get in the way. We can't let other decisions get prioritized so that this is important. So I'm like, okay, well, let's do our best. Let's make this really good. She's like, okay, we're gonna plan it. She's like the fourth of five kids, so she's not the natural like decision choice for who should be it. She doesn't live the closest to her parents. She's not the oldest. There's all the natural decision markers aren't there.
Well, I mean, that's true to a point. There's like, oh, well, they live closer. Oh, well, they're the oldest. But then everybody can also go, oh, but she's clearly the most well put together. So this is the person that we needed to use here.
So her oldest sister is a doctor.
I mean, that's something, but I've
So
seen
she's
some
pretty well put
really
together, but she's also very busy. Like, she just doesn't have time for this.
that's the good way of that's the better thing that I was going to say. We're going to pretend that I was
Her
going to go with
second
that.
sister is an excellent planner. Like, she's fantastic, but she lives in Idaho.
Okay.
Her brother also lives in Idaho. Her little sister lives with their parents, but she has little tiny kids and she doesn't have the bandwidth.
You guys live in some random state. What is it? It starts with
Yeah.
an I, like Illinois, right?
Right.
Isn't that all just in the middle somewhere?
Well, her parents live up near Chicago and we live down near St. Louis, which is about 5 hours away.
Okay.
So it's close enough that we can, go up there and make it happen. So we started planning the party, trying to make it important. More to come on that. I lost a battle this week because they just wanted to have it at the church because it was free, but the church is dark and boring and ugly.
You started this whole thing about 50th wedding anniversaries, and it hasn't even happened yet?
No, the party's not till July.
Oh.
Well, here's the thing, Josh. Okay, I'll tie it all together and then we can move on to Bad at English.
All right.
So I'd made a decision brief. I made a 3-decision COA brief and sent it out to all of her siblings. Like, here are 3 possibilities of locations. We can do it at the church, which is free, but we have to, set everything up and it's ugly and it's not great. Or we can do it at this banquet hall downtown and they'll cater everything and it'll be beautiful and stuff, but it's kind of expensive. Or, and this is the way you do COA briefs in the military, or we can do it here, which is the one that I wanted. And it is 15 minutes from my wife's house is the beautiful town square where they filmed the film Groundhog Day, Woodstock, Illinois. And they have an event center right on the plaza, like right where, Punxsutawney Phil saw his shadow. And it was going to be like $400 to rent this venue for the day, and I could not talk them into it. Couldn't do it.
So what do they end up going with? The church?
The church.
Yeah. The church. Don't be too disappointed or sound bad about that. Well,
I'll be supportive. I'm disappointed we don't get to do it in the Groundhog Day town square.
Of course you're going to be supportive. You're Ben Rich. You'll continue to plan and do all of it without even realizing that's what you're doing.
Yeah. That brings us to Bad at English. So in our book discussion today, we're going to talk about what it means to be crazy a little bit. I think will be part of our discussion. So I looked through my library and I found one of my favorite English words, which is the word barking. Balking, as they say, which they use as a shortcut for a longer phrase, which is barking mad, which is like regular mad, as in crazy, but more. If you're mad, you're crazy. But if you're barking mad, that's the most kind of crazy
that's
you can
like
be.
That's like tacking on the extra superlative adjective in front of it just to really emphasize this is the double plus crazy.
Yes, but in Grand British English style, they tend to do it where they modify the noun and then they remove the noun and only leave the modifier. So then they would say that person is balking or that's balking, which just means that's really crazy.
Okay. That's
so
I love how you said, it's the abbreviation of a shorter phrase, barking mad. And so like barking to barking mad, you're eliminating
Longer.
3 characters in a space. So it's like you're not really saving a lot of time or effort by cutting out the mad there.
So I looked it up for the etymology of it, and there's kind of the obvious one of like if a human is crazy and they're barking like a dog, then that's really crazy.
Well, isn't that a phrase too? Like barking at the moon? That's
yeah.
That's associated
and
with
that's
crazy.
kind of the obvious one, but it wasn't sure. Now I found this obscure one that there used to be an abbey in London where they would send crazy people. It was like an insane asylum, and it was in a place called Barking. Like there's a town in London called Barking. So this Barking Abbey was where they would send the crazy people, and it was well known for a long time in London. So I found this beautiful little phrase where when Margaret Thatcher was in Parliament, her opponents used to say that she was crazy. And so they came up with a nickname in Grand English style that was this really obscure reference. They would call her Daggers Thatcher. Daggers is the nickname for a subway stop on that's 3 stops past Barking. So if you wanted to say that someone was crazy in London, you would say they're 3 stops past Barking, which is, and it's not actually called, the name of the stop is Dagenham Heathway, but for short they call it Daggers.
That's what
so they called her Daggers Thatcher to mean that she was 3 stops past Barking, which more than barking mad.
So all right, you have mad, you have barking mad, then you have
Barking mad,
Daggers, which is 3 stops past barking mad.
Yes, and then they Dagenham Heathway, which is 3 stops past Barking, and then they shortened Dagenham Heathway to Daggers, and then they called Margaret Thatcher Daggers Thatcher, which meant that she was 3 stops past Barking.
Like I feel like you shouldn't need an English dissertation. Like you shouldn't have to read a novel to pick up on a handful of slang words when you're walking around, you know? Like that's super complicated. Are we ever going to devolve to that? Like have we devolved to that? Are there words in American English that are like derivatives of derivatives that we're like 3 or 4 steps past it now?
I'm going to need to put some thought into that. Maybe I'll talk about that at Bad at English next time.
Well, I'll tell you what, my wife and I, we definitely have inside jokes that are so thick and nuanced. They're like inside jokes inside of an inside joke, inside of a double entendre, inside of a movie reference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if we have any that are just public. But I think that like calling Margaret Thatcher Daggers was supposed to be enough of an inside joke that it just wasn't widely known that meant they were calling her crazy.
Well, it's widely known now. You looked it up on the internet.
Yeah.
Nothing
there
stays
was no
secret
internet back
anymore.
in the mid 80s.
Back in the mid 80s, yeah. Well, it was just a glimmer in Al Gore's eye.
So you and I have talked in the show in the past about our fitness, and I think we have a common goal in mind, and you've got a proposal that maybe we can get our listeners involved with.
All right, so there's a little bit of explanation on my side. My fitness, the way I work my fitness is I have critical points that I reach, and then that's when my actions, my behavior changes. It's at both the top and the bottom of the scale. So there's things that trigger me going, oh crap, I need to lose weight. And there's things that trigger me going, you know what, I'm doing good, I'm going to slack off. And I just hit one of those triggers where I need to lose some weight. And in the past, my family and I, what we've done is we've set up, it's accountability thing, right? The hardest part about the gym is actually going. And so if you always sign up with a partner or if you have other people that are encouraging you to do it, and this is why you have all these social aspects to gym going and dieting and all that, because if you have other people relying on you, it makes it easier to create motivation to do the right things. So in that venue, I had created this little online tracker thing that we used for a while and made a little competition. We said, okay, we're going to go from date A to date B, and then you're going to weigh in every week, or you're going to do measurements every week, and you're going to put the information into the system. And then it's all kind of visible to the people that know where to go find it. And so it's like this way of tracking, and then we can tell at the end who's lost the most weight and who's won the healthy competition or whatever. And so that helps to encourage us to all, just keep accountability on everybody else to generate that motivation you need to stay on top of things. Because it's really easy to just like, should I eat this salad or should I go get that Wendy's cheeseburger? Because, man, that cheeseburger sounds good.
Yeah.
So
I love it. It sounds like a great idea.
So with that, I had the thought that since I've hit this level, and I know you were talking about you wanted to get back into better shape a little bit.
Yeah. I'm not. If I had to take my PT test today, I would not get an excellent like I have the last 9 years in a row. So
there you go. I can adapt this little tool that we have used in the past, and I can throw it up onto our website. And now my original thought was we could just throw it up there for you and I, and then you and I could see each other's progress, and we could be each other's accountability buddies. But you wanted to take it to the next level, and I think that's excellent.
Let's get the listeners involved.
Yeah. So do you want to dive into that part of it?
Yeah. So you'd proposed a start date and an end date. I think our start date can be the release of episode 15. And then our end date can be our next kind of upcoming thing, which will be Grand Prix Vegas towards the middle of August, which will be about the 1 year anniversary of the podcast, and it'll be kind of a marker. I think it'd be a good time period for accountability. So that's about 4 months.
That is, I think, 5 months now. It's like the end of August. This is early March as we're recording, so it's like about 5 months, which is enough time to lose some weight and get healthier in a controlled and healthy fashion. There's no crash dieting. There's not going to be anything crazy going on. Please stay healthy, people. One of the things...
Yeah, we don't need to prescribe a particular method, but I think just the public accountability and maybe the discussion that can happen around it, sharing ideas, encouraging each other, I think that's something this community can engage in.
Excellent. I will post this tool up on the website. I'm going to make some modifications to it. So one of the things that I'm going to do is that it won't actually show any weight. What we do in the past is, like, it's not fair for me and you to compete directly because I already, like, weigh a lot more than you do.
Right.
So
people can tell that by seeing our photo. If you look at the website or the Facebook page, you've got a solid 14 inches on me.
So if that's an exaggeration. But if we were just going to go straight off of who lost the most weight, it would be easier for me to lose a larger number of raw pounds. But instead... Sure. The system that we've used in the past is an old Army method for measuring body fat. And so you take some simple measurements with like a sewing tape measure. For the men, it's around the neck and the waist. And for the ladies, you also add in like a hip measurement. And then it puts through this big, fancy, Department of Defense authorized and approved mathematical formula that spits out what your baseline body fat is. Now,
so there's some science behind the ratio between the diameter of your neck and the diameter of your waist that tells what your body fat percentage is?
The best that I can figure is that the neck is like a control measurement for your size, because your neck doesn't really gain or lose that much weight, whereas your waist really will. So I think that kind of sets like the bar of like, okay, well, if his neck is about this big, I think it's just like an anchor point for the calculations. But none of that really matters, because as long as the measurements are consistent, like even if it comes up with a totally wrong, like this is no way that this is my body fat calculation.
Just the change over time is what we're looking at.
Exactly. And so we're not going to, if people are discouraged from posting because they don't want their information out there, I completely agree with that. We're going to put up nothing but usernames that people will put up for themselves. There's going to be no private information that's publicized anywhere. There's not going to be any starter and we're not going to ask for your weight. You don't have to put what you weigh out into the internet. It's just going to show like from the first time that you weigh, it'll just say, yep, check, we got the baseline measurement. And then from that point forward, it's just going to show the changes. And so that'll be the competition, is who can actually lose the largest percentage of body fat over the course of the competition.
Great. I love it. So we'll have to come up with a clever way to just, in future episodes, to just give it a quick little segment where we look at how many people are participating. We can kind of maybe highlight who is the top loser during that podcast cycle, and give each other some encouragement. Yeah. And I think that's really what... Even if you don't know who we are, if you've never met us, if we're not personal friends, like just being a part of a group, even if it's online and through like this little podcast, and we'll mention people's usernames and give them shout outs on how well they're doing. But hopefully that will not only encourage you and I, because I know you and I'm in direct competition with you,
That'll encourage us to stay in better shape. Maybe that'll help some of the listeners out there that have been struggling with this as well.
That's great. I love it. I'm looking forward to it, and I thank you for bringing it up. And I hope our listeners can find some utility out of it too. And I'm excited to see what this will bring for all of us over the next few months.
All right, my goal is to have the website up and running by the time the podcast goes live. And then it's going to have to be a weekly, like kind of, I'm going to do air quotes, weigh-in. It'll just be at some point during whatever week, you need to do the measurements, put your information in the system, and then we'll just go from there.
Okay. And I'll put a link to the tool on badatmagic.live in the show notes.
Woo!
So last time we announced the results of the book poll, and we selected Legion, The Many Lives of Stephen Leeds by Brandon Sanderson. And go ahead and give your spoiler disclaimers and all that kind of stuff.
All right, so this is something we've done before, and I think we're going to do it again because it's really helpful for the listeners that just don't want to read books. I'm talking about you, my brother, who you know who you are. He's just never going to read anything we recommend ever. So this is your chance, listeners. If you haven't listened to the book and you plan on doing it, or you have no intent of listening to the book at all and you don't care about the discussion, this is your chance to bail out. So we can do the wrap-up stuff now, and then we can transition to the book. Does that sound good to you?
Well, so that's a good spoiler warning. Like, if you intend to read the book and you don't want to have spoilers, definitely that's going to happen. But if you're the kind of person that's never going to read the book, I encourage you to stick around, because there's some really interesting ideas in this book, and I think the discussion will be enlightening regardless of whether or not you intend to read the book.
Fair enough. With that said, if you are going to bail out, thank you very much for tuning in. We thank all of our listeners that come and tune into the Bad at Magic podcast. If you appreciate what we do here, please tell your friends. Go check out our YouTube channel. Give us likes and subscribes there. We're on Reddit. Please join the discussion. Ben is constantly updating stuff on the Facebook page, which is awesome. I go to the Facebook page and am surprised at how much stuff is there sometimes. So just join in the discussion. Be a part of it.
Okay. So you asked me to read this book, and gosh, how do we go about this?
So that's
what we've been doing with most of the intellectual properties we look at is we do our Bad at Magic rating. This is the Bad at Magic podcast. How bad at magic is this book?
I love where you're going with this, but I think one thing that we need to do that we have not been doing is that if people haven't listened to the book, maybe we should just do a quick 2-minute, what is this book and what are we going to be talking about?
Okay.
Okay.
Take it away.
So Brandon Sanderson wrote this book. Originally, it was 3 separate short stories, 3 separate vignettes about the same character and kind of the same
It feels
thing.
like that, too. When you start reading the subsequent ones, there's a little bit of introductory material, assuming you hadn't read the others.
Right. And so the idea is that Stephen Leeds is our main protagonist, and he is a very smart person. It's never said exactly how smart he is, but he's also a very crazy person. So he's able to take in huge amounts of information in very little time. He can set an audio book to 5 times speed and listen to it with half an ear, and it all gets dumped into his brain and he has perfect recollection of it. The problem is that he's crazy, and he himself doesn't have access to that information. He creates these illusions, these hallucinations that he calls aspects that are real people to him. And they have their own distinct personalities and feels and everything, and they have all of the information as if they were experts on the thing that he just researched. And as we jump into the first book, I think he has something along the lines of 50 plus of these hallucinatory super experts on different things. And his whole shtick is that he's kind of a private investigator.
But these people, these aspects aren't just geniuses, they're also people. They have quirks, they have drawbacks, they have limitations.
They have personalities.
So they have races and genders that aren't the same as his, which is really interesting.
And so, it's this book about, it's this interesting kind of mystery. Each one has a little mystery element to it, and he's trying to solve the case, wrapped in this idea that there's this cast of characters that are all experts trying to do this thing, with the fact that only one of maybe 5 or 6 people in this scene actually physically exist and can interact with the real world. And he is fully aware that these other aspects of himself aren't real. He's totally and completely understands that he's the only one that can see and interact with them. Nobody else can see them. He knows that. So that's one of the biggest reasons I recommended this.
He also has a degree of fondness for them that goes beyond and attachment to them that goes beyond what would be reasonable for imaginary friends, like Bing Bong from Inside Out.
Right. Well, and they're not like imaginary friends. Is such a bad term, like almost a racist term to use against these. These are real people, Ben. To him, they're real people to him, and so he treats them like real people. He lives in a mansion where everybody gets their own bedroom. Like they're constantly interfering with his life, and he just kind of puts up with it. Like it's craziness.
Okay, so central to this discussion, this idea that the author's exploring, right in the prologue, he says, I was fascinated with the idea of psychology as a superpower. And I like that phrase. Basically, that you could just have a weird psychology that's abnormal compared to other people, but that could empower you more than it could handicap you. And that's really what's going on here. And before I even had gotten into the mechanics of the book and found out what was going on, it reminded me of a film I'd seen recently, which was Split by M. Night Shyamalan. Did you see that one?
I did not see that one.
Okay. Well, the central idea of it is that there's this guy who's crazy, and he's schizophrenic, and he, over the course of the story, it comes out that he basically developed these schizophrenic personalities as a defense because he was abused by his mother as a child. And so he just developed these other personalities as a defense mechanism. But then as he left, that remained with him, but instead of it just making him crazy, it also kind of made him powerful. And so he had certain personalities that were good at certain things, and at the extreme end of it, it also gave him physical abilities, which is something that Sanderson doesn't do here. But there seemed to be some research behind that people with like for instance, one of his characters was diabetic, and so when he was that personality, he was diabetic. But then when he wasn't that personality, he wasn't, which was an interesting idea to explore.
So this was the character that was kind of spawned that movie Glass with the other characters.
Exactly.
Exactly. Okay, got it.
So, yeah, this is an idea that has some merit, maybe even in real life, that people could have multiple personalities in one way or another. But the way Stephen Leeds in this book series controls it and harnesses it is, like you said, having these aspects be other people that he talks to. And one of the most fascinating things that's kind of a mechanic throughout the entire book is that he has to make physical accommodations for his psychological hallucinations.
Right. He bought multiple plane tickets so they would have empty seats that they could sit in when they flew overseas.
And he would have to pick a limited number of them to bring with him when he travels, only that he could have physical space to accommodate.
Right. And so that's kind of the shtick. And then the vignettes that we have in this is the first book, or the first story, is a piece of technology, of high technology, was stolen. It was a camera that theoretically could take pictures of the past.
It just had to be in the right place, and then you set a dial like in the DeLorean in Back to the Future, and just take a picture and see whatever happened at that place in the past.
Right. You couldn't see anywhere in the past. You had to physically be at that location, and then you had like a focus knob that you had to fine tune to go back and however far you wanted to take the picture of. And if there was something there, great. If there wasn't, then well, you just kind of wasted a picture. And so what did you think about this story, Ben? This is your first time reading it, correct?
Okay, so one thing Brandon Sanderson's really good at doing is coming up with ideas that are rich in their detail and possibilities that really capture my imagination. And so both of these things grabbed me immediately. The psychology as a superpower idea, and the camera that can take a picture of the past idea. And if you're one of our listeners is listening to this and your mind is kind of reeling with all the possibilities of a camera that can take a picture of the past, you're right to do so, because there's so many possible things you could do with this. Imagine if we had a camera that could take a picture of the past. Like, there would be, like, what would that do to our justice system? There would be no more trials to try to figure out what happened. We would just have court cases to decide what to do about it.
Well, think about the ramifications to information security. You could never, ever have anything written down or displayed in a format that you could read. Everything would have to be, anything that was of secrecy or that was sensitive would have to be shifted to some kind of audio recording.
Yeah. Yeah, so obviously, and then when you get into that kind of thing, like no more secrets kind of thing, then it goes quickly, as any new technology does, into the space of like potential weapon.
No, it goes no.
And therefore, very powerful people are interested in it.
First, it goes, how can I use this to see people naked? That's the first place it goes.
Just okay, Josh. Might I remind you, the internet first was a weapon, and then it was to see people naked.
Yeah, but it was a weapon for a long time and nobody cared. And then when you could use it to see people naked, all of a sudden it's in everybody's home and everybody's pocket.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Fair point. But first, it's a weapon. Okay, we got to agree on that. First weapon.
Weapon.
Same kind of thing. Which is what makes for the intrigue of what this. I want to say that at its heart, this is like a Sherlock Holmes style mystery, but with no Watson. His Watson are these other aspects of his personality.
Yes.
So we have a detective at the center who's brilliant and very observant and can use the observance. Now, I get off a little bit, as in like get off the bus when it comes to a Sherlock Holmes style story. I just don't like it. The author's basically showing off at how smart our protagonist can be at solving a story when he controls the story. Like if he notices some minute detail, it's a detail he put there. Like it's not amazing to me.
So it's you have a problem with the meta-ness of like a mystery kind of novel. You can't just enjoy the ride. You're always aware in the background. That guy in your head is chirping like, he wrote this whole thing. This is a fabrication.
Right. So why is it so amazing that he observed some small detail that no one else would have noticed? The author wrote all of that.
Right. And that's kind of, I'm not going to say that's nitpicking, but I can understand your complaints with the genre. However, the genre itself is a good way to convey interesting ideas in a way that's unexpected. For example, in this particular story, it turns out, spoilers people, the person who stole the camera was the person who originally had invented it, and he was a very devout religious person.
Christian.
And he took the camera to Jerusalem in order to attempt to take a picture of Christ.
Okay, so this part took my breath away, Josh. Like, first of all, the fact that I know that Brandon Sanderson is a member of my church, and I was like, where's he going to go with this? What is he going to do? We have a fanatical Christian who's invented a scientific device that can take pictures of the past, and now he wants to go take photos of Christ dying and then being resurrected as proof that Christianity is true. So, all of that being said, I want to ask you the question, as an atheist, if such a device existed and can take photos of these things, how would that impact you?
So that's an interesting question. How would that impact? Like if we had, basically the question that you're asking is if we had undeniable scientific evidence that these miraculous things took place, they're real events, how would that affect my faith?
Yes.
Well, obviously I would have to start doing a lot more reading about, into Christianity, because if I was presented with irrefutable scientific evidence, I mean, you anybody that doesn't reevaluate their position in the face of clear, hard, quantifiable evidence is deliberately choosing to be wrong. Now, this said, I would probably still be skeptical of charlatanism, right, if it was just a couple of photographs, right?
Sure, but there's still people who question the moon landing. I mean, like you said,
yeah. What I'm getting at, though, is that I would hold out. I would hold out until this technology got a little more developed. In the book, like this is the prototype. There was only one camera that could do it, and it only took black and white photos. Well, come on, Ben. We know how photography works. It's only a matter of time before it's color. It's only a matter of time before it's full motion video. It's only a matter of time before it's full digital video. So give it some time to mature as a technology, and we'll have the complete three-dimensional story of Christ from multiple angles, as like 10 different film studios are trying to get the same story at the same time.
Yeah. So ultimately, I'd say Sanderson kind of just sidestepped the whole thing. Like, he presented us the idea, my imagination was captured by it, I wondered what he was going to do, but there really wasn't anywhere good for him to go with this idea that what if you could prove Christianity? Like, it's not a good idea to just prove that in the book and make that the subject of what you're writing about. So then something happens, the technology's lost, they only, they have a roll of film shot of Christ, and they had one picture turn out, and it was inconclusive.
Right. And like, honestly, this is the clever thing to do, because one, in the real world, in the meta-ness of it, he's not going to alienate any of his audience by taking a firm stance in the story one way or the other.
Right. That Christianity is true and we're proving it.
Right.
Or it's not.
Second, by introducing the idea, but then not wrapping it up, it gives us, the listeners, that little question, well, what if it had? Like the discussion that we're having now is all predicated on the fact that he didn't close the loop. That was
brilliant. Props to him for that.
Yeah, it was really well done. Because like can you imagine how militant religion would be if they could prove or disprove specific beliefs in it?
I don't know if militant is the right idea. I mean, if you could really prove that Christ exists, then we would have to take his ideas more seriously, which aren't militant at all.
No, that's not militant. What I'm talking about, the militant piece of it would be the tribalism of people. It would be like, oh, Christians be like, oh, great, this is real. And then there's going to be that small faction of Christians that are screaming at anybody that has a Muslim faith or anybody that has a Hindu faith or anybody that has...
I don't know. It's too big of a fundamental question. I guess like after all, everything's developed now in the modern day. We develop a time travel camera and we can show Christ being crucified and then being resurrected. Like, okay, that proves that all that happened, but I don't know. There would still be a lot. So there was one case where his aspects were discussing this hypothetical, and one said like, well, what if they did prove it? And they had this exact discussion in the book. Like, well, there's crazy people that there are people that are fanatical about their beliefs that still wouldn't change their beliefs, and there's ones that already believe it that this would that wouldn't really change either, so it wouldn't change that much.
Yeah, I don't know. I always tend to see the worst side of things, and so I could see this becoming a very charged, animated, passionate, violent discussion over who's actually right.
Yeah, I don't know. I've had too many discussions in my marriage where I know that I'm right, and when the proof comes out, it like doesn't matter anymore.
Now, one thing that this pointed out that I'm going to have to bring up again is like the way that this was couched in the book, as far as how information security would be affected by a picture that could take pictures, a camera that could take pictures of the past.
Yeah, go for it.
Like the character that was introducing this concept to our protagonist even said, if anybody could get access to a location where you had ever been naked. And like that was the first way that we were introduced to the concept of what impact this camera was going to have. Right back to naked people, Ben.
Yeah, just take unwitting nudes of you.
Yeah. In which case, like if we had this technology, like again, like it was going to develop into full video. So then there's
I don't know. It's easy for me to imagine the full extent of that. That is, okay, if you could do that to one person, you could do it to every single person on Earth. So doesn't it just become null?
That's exactly where I'm going. Like it would take one generation, and now all of a sudden nobody cares about what anybody looks like naked anymore. That's the first thing. Right. The second thing is there is no better reality TV on the planet than watching real live like gladiators in the Roman Colosseum. It's like, oh, we're not killing anybody. These people are already long dead. We might as well profit off of, who's going to win the ultimate tournament at the end of it.
Wow.
Can you imagine that?
That's a fascinating idea, to just like turn on the History Channel. Instead of watching a reenactment of the gladiators, you're actually watching Roman gladiators.
Can you imagine like what military training would be like? Like I bring it back to that because we're military guys. Sorry, listeners. There's much more interesting things about this. Like, all right, I'm gonna deliberately change. Imagine watching like a board meeting of like U.S. Steel before the Depression hit or something.
Yeah. Yeah, the possibilities are endless, and we could go down this rabbit hole forever.
Yes.
So I want to back it up to the top level for a second, because one of the things that they explore as we've introduced Stephen Leeds as our protagonist with all of his 50 aspects that all have different personalities and quirks and strengths and weaknesses is the idea of what actually constitutes being crazy.
Okay. And
so
yeah,
what did you come away with as your understanding of the definition of being crazy?
Well, and this is something that actually touches, like, I'm not going to say close to home because I don't think I have any mental illnesses. I don't know anybody personally that has any like really hard mental illnesses. But the definition that the protagonist gives is like, oh, I'm not crazy, because the definition of crazy is that I can no longer function in normal society. And like he says if you have a psychology that impinges on your ability to lead a normal life. Right. And that's where he drew his line. Like, I'm not crazy because I can still lead a normal, and we're going to air quote normal life, because he does have to have a mansion with 50 spare bedrooms for all of his imaginary friends.
Right.
But,
and he can afford, yeah.
We're abstracting all that away. Like, that's fine. He can afford it. We're good. All those logistics go away. The storytelling is cleaner. For me personally, though, like, I don't like to put labels on mental illnesses a lot of the time. I think our society is too quick to define what is normal and what is abnormal, and like just to try to put people in these boxes. Like, so what if this person is a little bit like processes information in a different way than you do? Like, why do we have to label them as the outsider?
Yeah, well, and we're experienced with this already. I mean, this isn't a new idea. Like, if there is a person in, a shabby old coat staying on the corner talking to himself, we say he's crazy. But if it's Elon Musk, we say he's eccentric.
Right.
But they could be doing the exact same behavior. It's just like the money changes the money and power and ability to function in a normal way changes our perception of the condition.
And I don't see, like, what's the purpose? Like, what is that, the movie with Russell Crowe where he's A Beautiful Mind? Or he's talking about the mathematician. What is it, Steve Nash? It's not Steve Nash, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well done.
Nice. Well, and like he's a
well, it's somebody Nash.
Maybe
Nash. Steve is the basketball player. I can't remember the Nash.
There you go. People screaming at your podcast players. Thank you. You're not yelling loud enough. I can't hear you. But the idea there is that the very brilliant mathematician who contributed a lot to our modern understanding of economic theory was flat insane. But does that discredit all of the thoughts that he had? Does that discredit the work that he did? John Nash. Okay, so does the fact that he saw imaginary people that in some cases spurred him to do better work, does that take away from his accomplishments? Why do we have to label him as crazy in the first place?
So in the film Split, the M. Night Shyamalan movie where we had our schizophrenic guy, the way he would manifest his different personalities is he would go somewhere else and change costumes basically and then come back as the other person. So he would never change in front of you from one person to another, but he would come back as another. And some of them, like one of them was a cannibal, so like when you have somebody with multiple personalities and one of them's a cannibal, you're going to, like, I don't see how you can steer clear of the definition of crazy. Like, that's going to be a problem.
Well, that's a problem because he's committing a crime at that point. If he wasn't a cannibal, or even if he was a cannibal that never actually acted on it, that never ate a person, now he's just different. He's just weird. Like if you, a perfectly sane person, decided to go out and kill and eat somebody else, like maybe people would call you crazy, but are you quantifiably crazy or are you just different? Like obviously you committed a crime and be punished for that.
So I had this thought as you're expressing it, and I sat down and I brainstormed all the ways in our society which we accept this kind of idea of not having a coherent singular psychology. So I wrote down phrases that people commonly use in America to express this idea. So here's one. Part of me still wants to. Like you said earlier, I want to eat this salad, but part of me wants to go get go have a piece of pizza. And we don't think that we're like expressing some idea of like a split personality or other aspects, but that's kind of what we're doing. You might also say, I have half a mind to give that kid a spanking, but I'm not gonna. It's like you're expressing this idea that there's multiple personalities within you that have a conflict.
Well, as the computer scientist, I want to throw in like I don't know if this is the current operating theory about how the human brain works, but basically it's a large difference engine. Like you have these pathways that you develop in your mind as you grow and develop, and like all the information that you're taking in goes through all of these pathways simultaneously. And at the end, they get different. They're weighted differently, and the one with the largest weight is usually the thing that you act on. So it's not uncommon to have different.
So, but you could be aware of the others.
Exactly. Like it's not uncommon to have these decisions where you're torn, where you feel like, oh, you could go either way and you don't really know what to do. And that's because you went through all of this filtering process and two different courses of action came out with similar weights.
But we still express this. Like if that happens, you might say, well, that's not the real me, or that wasn't what he really meant to do. But like you said, when the whole equation gets weighed, whatever you do is the thing that got the most weight.
Right. Exactly. This is why, like, I still, to this day, I think about, like, Inside Out ruined it because, like, that's basically how I imagine my brain works. But it's much cooler in my brain. There's more people. They're much better looking.
Sometimes the angry guy's driving. Sometimes the happy guy's driving.
No, there's always the one guy driving. Everybody has their own station, and people get priority based on the circumstances.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very much.
Yeah,
This,
I thought about Inside Inside Out a lot as we were reading this.
yeah, this is very much an Inside Out type of book before the movie came out. All right.
So here's a few of the other phrases I wrote down.
Okay.
It was like a whole other person was, I don't know what came over me. He's playing out of his mind. Or even if you had a case where your lawyer was arguing an insanity plea. Or talking to yourself. Like when you're talking to yourself, who are you talking to? Who's talking and who's listening?
You are. Well, a lot of people think by talking. Extroverts especially.
I don't talk to myself, but some people do.
Some people do talk to themselves. Some people have to. Have you ever been in a meeting where you feel like somebody just won't shut up? Like, dude, stop talking. We all figured this out like 10 minutes ago. That guy is literally talking through his own thoughts in order to process it. Like some people have to verbalize to process. That's the difference in... This is the difference in brain psychology that I'm talking about that leads people to... that wants us to label people as crazy when maybe they're just different. The guy on the corner, like you said, that's muttering to himself, maybe he's just processing a really complicated decision and he can't keep his thoughts inside his head.
So this is one aspect I think that's really strong with you. You're very good at living in a psychological place where you don't judge other people. Like you just give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, I don't know what's going on with that guy. I'll let him live his own life.
Are we going to talk about our own psychology? Because that seems like
a little bit.
Gets really deep really fast. Okay. So
because I'd ask you a question. I'd sent you a text during the week to ask you to think about this.
Yes. And like there's some aspects that are good and some aspects that are bad. But like, for example, there's things that I've cultivated, that I've attempted to cultivate within myself, traits that I want to have. And one of the biggest ones that I have is, as a younger man, I had real problems with anger and like just controlling my emotions. Like I'm a very passionate person. It doesn't take much for me to get really riled up about a subject, right? And
right.
Too often I would let emotion bleed into that passion because they are different. And then the emotion starts to color the discussion, or I start putting blame on somebody, or I end up in this place where I'm feeling bad or I'm angry and I'm upset. And I don't know why. And so I've tried very deliberately to cultivate this sense or this awareness of my own emotional state. And even like recently, like I can name 2 different occasions in the past month where I'd be getting into a heated discussion or a passionate topic or with whoever, and like this little warning light would go off in my head, that little overseer function that's cycling in my brain says, hey, you're getting way too emotionally invested into this. And it just gives me that little warning to step back and say, all right, why am I starting to feel this way? Do I really care about this much? Is this the sword I want to fall on? And in most cases, the answer is no.
So do you feel like, I don't know, is it like Inside Out? You got like a angry guy and you've overpowered his controls, or he doesn't drive as often, or he's just mellowed out a little?
Well, if we want to boil it down to a G-rated Pixar movie, let me talk about my innermost insecurities with you in the lens of an animated film. So yeah, it would be like, in my younger days, the angry guy drove a lot, and I didn't like where he drove us. I didn't like where we ended up, and so I kind of built this functionality in my mind where I can kind of push him away from the steering wheel deliberately if I recognize that this is not a road I want to go down.
Yeah.
He's still angry. He's still there, but the larger portion of me realizes, like, if I continue to pursue this feeling, because like when you're mad, you just want to stay mad. Like everybody listening knows that feeling where you start having the one-sided argument, like you're mad at somebody and you're having the argument with yourself in your head with that person because you just want to stay mad.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
And so that's the thing, is I've recognized a while ago, I don't like when I'm mad. After I'm mad, I feel bad about being mad. So I recognize I don't want to be mad. Is this really what I want to be feeling right now?
I like the way that you described it, where there's this complex equation is happening inside of you, and at the end of it, it's all been weighed and measured, and then a result comes out, and that's like whatever got the most weight after it had gone through all of your internal Rube Goldberg machine.
Right. And that changes depending on your feelings that day. Like if you've had enough sleep, if you're hungry, if you're mad.
Oh man, I was telling Alicia that like some days I don't even know what I'm gonna do. I don't know what all's happening behind the locked door inside there. As far as like today, I may take a different way home from work, and I don't know why. I didn't plan that until it happened.
You see, some people would call that crazy. Like what are you thinking? And with your volume at 17, I'm going to go some way I've never driven home. You are a crazy person.
So, at one point, when they were talking about the idea of proving Christianity with this camera that points to the past, she asks him, there's a reporter or a spy, I don't remember what, and she asks him, how he feels about that. And he answers with this kind of funny answer about how he's like 18% atheist. And I liked that expression that he gave it. Like, he recognized that of all the personalities inside of him, these many believed it and these many don't. And even though I don't have these multiple aspects inside of me, if you were to ask me what percentage Christian I am, I wouldn't say 100%.
Right, because I think it would be irresponsible to say 100% anything.
Right. So I wanted to ask you that question. Like, do you... So...
Oh, flip it around on me.
Well... Okay, so let me answer it first, and then I'll ask you.
Ben's ongoing crusade to convert me.
100% Christian to me would mean like I had seen Christ personally. So less than 100% means that I believe in him the way that I think he intended for him, and that's through faith, which means that I still have doubts. I don't know for sure, but I think he's real. I think he created the world and that he came to earth and he lived and died and then was resurrected like it says in the Bible. I think so. I'd say 80%
so
Christian.
You're actually talking about a concept in the movie Constantine where Gabriel was talking to John Constantine. It was like,
I only saw that once and I don't remember this.
Well, Gabriel has to says to him, like, well, you have to believe. And then Constantine gets all mad. It's like, I believe. And she goes, no, you know. And that's different. And so faith is nothing without uncertainty.
So what percent atheist are you?
I'm going to say, because I like multiples of 5, I'm going to say 85% atheist.
Okay.
So I've always, like, every once in a while, I'll have a random thought as I'm looking up at the stars and just think, like, like if God is omnipotent, like assuming there is a God, assuming God is omnipotent, then that means that God would have to contain all of the information of all of the universe in all periods of time, forward and backwards. Which means that God would have to be the universe in order to contain that information. Like the information would just be the same. Never mind. This is getting too complicated. So every once in a while,
wow, you almost made my head explode.
The mathematical theories of quantum mechanics and string theory, and we're all a holographic projection from a black hole, and all that crap kind of feeds into it.
So we talked about other intellectual properties that kind of use this same mechanism, but in a different kind of way. Like Split by M. Night Shyamalan and Inside Out, it's not quite the same. I thought of two that were almost exactly the same. Ratatouille and Jojo Rabbit. So in Ratatouille, the rat has an imaginary friend that's, Chef Gusteau, right?
Right.
And he talks to Gusteau, and Gusteau has the personality that's similar to the Gusteau you've seen on the television show. But at one point, when he's talking to the chef, he's like, why don't you know this? And he's like, because I'm a figment of your imagination. I don't know anything you don't know. So I think the way that they represented Remy's relationship with Chef Gusteau in Ratatouille is almost exactly the same as Stephen Leeds' relationship with his aspects in this book.
Right. Well, and that, once we get down to the third vignette, that's kind of like the focus. So the first two are the Sherlock Holmes spy mysteries, and the third one is very much more an in-depth, psychological exploration of himself. And one of the things that they talk about a lot is that there are rules, and they all acknowledge that there are rules, but they never talk about it. It's like you're not allowed to walk through other people. You're not allowed to just appear and disappear. You have to follow the rules. If you're going to be an imaginary person, you need to pretend that you're a real person.
So that gets into our discussion on a magic system.
Okay.
Right?
Kind of. Sure. Why not?
This is a magic system. So we have rules about the magic system so that we as the reader understand what the rules are, and then we can kind of judge if something that's happening is following the rules, and then the tension that comes out of the story can be derived from its adherence to the system that we understand.
Right. A clever use
like,
of
at
the
one
system
point-
within the rules is better than some Deus Ex use of the system in some mechanic we've never heard of.
Exactly. So at one point, one of the antagonists approaches Stephen Leeds, who, instead of just treating him like a genius who's weird, she actually has done enough research on him that she understands the way he interacts with his aspects and uses it against him. Like, she gets him in a car at gunpoint and she pretends they're going to get out, and he opens the door to let his aspects out first, and then she drives away and basically leaves them behind, even though they're just his imaginary friends. And now he has to cope without these aspects of his personality.
Right, because the key point to all of this is that the information that he's gained, these skills, while they're in his brain, he doesn't have access to them. The way that his weird psychology has worked its way to stability is that these other imaginary people have these skill sets. Like, he has some of the people he takes with him all the time. One of them is like a random trivia and a historian and a philosopher. One of them is basically the embodiment of all of his people skills. Like, he has no idea how to even read facial expressions if she's not around to explain it to him. And so,
right.
And because
but she can tell things like if someone's lying or how they're. She's almost like Deanna Troi from Next Generation.
Yeah, like what you would expect a really good like interrogator to be like, just picking up on facial cues and body language and verbiage things. Like, yeah, very hardcore. But like, and again, like, he wants to follow these rules, and he has these rules for his imaginary, for his aspects. Like, they're real people; they can't appear and disappear, et cetera, et cetera. And this person that took advantage of it knew that, and she knew that he was going to let them all out first. And once they were all out, they drove off, and the protagonist was physically incapable of bringing them back. Like, he looked out the car window and screamed for them because they were driving away and they were left on the side of the road. One of them tried to run after the car for a while, but he could not. He knew they were imaginary and not real people, but he could not sustain the illusion that they could keep up with the car as they were driving away.
Yeah. Now, one mechanism Sanderson uses in the story that I like is having these people that are aware of his condition, and every now and then they just stop for a minute and kind of talk about it. Sometimes it's a reporter, sometimes it's a psychologist, sometimes it's a spy or some type of antagonist, and it just allows him to explore all of the intricate, fascinating details of this idea of psychology as a superpower.
Okay.
Now, one of the ideas that he utilizes this for, like you said, he doesn't have access to the fact that he's a genius except through these imaginary friends that he has, these aspects, was something that's always fascinated me about the human brain. And that is that if you think of information in just terms of quantity, like a computer, it doesn't make sense that we as human beings remember things when there's more of it. Like, if you want to memorize, say, a list of words, you can memorize it better if you see it, draw pictures of it, and reorder it so that it rhymes and put it to music. And even though in terms of just pure quantity of information, that's even more information than you were starting with, but the fact that you've added all those other pathways in your brain is what makes it memorable, and therefore that you can access it.
Well, and that's may or may not be true for different people. Everyone has different learning styles. Like, I actually have never had problems just memorizing lists of words and numbers. Like, I remember this instance very specifically when I was a kid. I must have been 13 or 14 years old, and I was doing homework at the kitchen table. And my mom in the background was on our old cordless phone back when you had landline phones in the house. And she said, "Oh, I need to call a different number." "Okay, what's the number?" And then she said the number out loud. She goes, "Okay, thank you." And she hung up. And then she hit the talk button on the phone again. She goes, "What was the number I just said?" And I remember looking at her going, "Why would you expect me to remember that?" And she goes, "Did you remember that?" And yeah, I had, but that wasn't the point. Like, she wasn't even talking to me. She wasn't telling me to remember the number. She was just in my hearing, and I remember the number.
So she already knew this about you and you didn't know it yet?
Apparently, yeah. And that's kind of the first instance that I can remember where I realized I have a really strong memory. For memorizing things, like word tricks or like.
Yeah, like, do you remember something better if it's to music or word tricks or whatever?
No,
You don't have to do that.
I don't know. And this is actually when you asked me, you texted me earlier this week, and you said like, "Is there anything weird about your psychology that's like a double-edged sword?" This is the one thing that I thought of like immediately. Is I have a very strong memory for like things that I hear. Like, and it to the point where it causes problems sometimes. Like, I can't help but correct people when I hear them make a mistake. Like, movie quotes are the one thing.
Example.
People will be quoting movies around me, and like I'm just no, those aren't the words that were used, and I have to correct it.
Well, I thank you for the restraint that you show on this podcast. So I realized this, and when I'd ask you the question, one of the things I was thinking of is something I'd heard once expressed by someone, some psychologist, where one of the amazing things about the human brain isn't just about all of the things it can remember, but all the things you forget. Like, we don't think about this because it's not a problem for us, but can you imagine if, like, every time you went to work at some place that had a giant parking lot and you went out and tried to remember where you parked, instead of that you remembered every single time you'd ever parked, like that just got recalled to your memory? It would be a train wreck in your brain.
Well, you assume that, because you're also assuming that you have your standard same processing capacity that you have now. If your brain were capable of remembering every single detail like that, you would develop some kind of a coping mechanism to get the information you wanted and to weed out the chaff, which arguably, Ben, is kind of what we do now.
Well, here's another example, the same thing. Let's say you're in a room where there's like a lot of conversations going on. You know, there's a lot of people talking. Your ability to just not focus on all of the other conversations and just focus on the relevant one and filter out all of that extraneous information is really kind of amazing. But that's one of the superpowers that Stephen Leeds has, is that his other aspects of his personalities can be listening to the other conversations. So that gives him what you might consider to be a superhuman ability. He can have paid attention to every single thing he's physically capable of perceiving.
And that's when we talk about this specific magic system. I think that's what this is. I think Stephen Leeds, our protagonist, has a mind that is capable of taking in vast quantities of information in very short amounts of time, but then where the difference is, where you or I would filter out, everything that our brain determined was inconsequential, his brain retains all of it and says this is all important. And I think that information overload drove him to create this coping mechanism to process all of that information by segmenting it off into specific bailiwicks.
So let's make a list of all the things we can remember that he did with that. He used it to learn languages very rapidly.
He had multiple, like every aspect that he had was skilled in some form of something. Like he, at one point at the end of the time camera book, he read a stack of books about theoretical physics, and he didn't even read them. He was having a conversation with another one of his aspects, and he would flip a page, glance at it, flip a page, and glance at it. And at the end of all those stacks of books, he had created a new aspect that was a theoretical physicist.
Yep. He also kind of had the like Sherlock Holmes powers of observation. Like he could just notice little tiny things about anything and then just have an expert that could recall its relevance to, current events or physics or science or whatever and be able to make sense out of something that, someone that didn't understand all those things would just be noise.
Multiple times in the book, he would walk into like a crime scene and like he would just say, go. Like he would tell his aspects, do your thing. And he would just glance around the room once and let his subconscious process all the information that he had just taken in through his aspects actually going around and looking at stuff in the room.
Okay, so let's give this the full bad at magic evaluation treatment here.
Hard or soft magic? It's couched as a very hard magic system.
Yeah, I guess so. Basically, the rule is if he can't perceive it, then it's outside of the realm of his aspects. And that there's rules around the aspects, like you said, the rules. They can't appear and disappear. He's got to kind of maintain physical space for them. He has to talk to them. Like he can't just, they don't have like a mind meld. He's got to actually discuss it out loud.
Yeah, they have to, there's multiple times where he has large amounts of information that he was just briefed on and he has to distribute it. And so he'll take shortcuts. Like one of his other aspects that were also there that heard the information, like, oh, I printed those out on these papers, and starts handing the papers out to the other aspects. So they have to pantomime this information distribution system. But they go through it all, and those are the hard and fast rules. Now, those rules are somewhat broken when we start talking about the third book, where he starts to descend back into what he considers to be his madness, where some of the aspects stop following the rules. They're just clearly figments of his imagination traveling through physical objects and causing physical harm to his other aspects, appearing and disappearing whenever they feel like it.
Would you call this regular plain old madness or barking madness?
I think that he's not barking mad. He can still go out and be a person in the world. One of my favorite scenes in this book is when he was on a date. Like, he was on a date with this illness, and there was the aspects with him at the restaurant. So, I don't know. When he starts to descend into madness, like, if he can't... All right, I'm starting to retract now, because I'm remembering there is a scene where he thinks that he is in a real place, and later we discover that he was actually just in, like, an abandoned building, and he was filling in all the details.
Yeah, well, they were introducing, like, this technology with the virtual reality. I didn't understand that part, but then it started to get really confusing.
So the beginning of that story, he went to what was supposed to be like an interview in an office, and he was talking to what was at the time supposed to be just a biographer. That whole building was fake, and that was nothing to do with the virtual reality. That was his mind filling in this entirely fake scenario. And so that's when he realized that was fake, that really started to freak him out. The later in the book, it was towards the end, is where the first time he started interacting with this. It was kind of a weird virtual reality setup. So we're skipping the whole second book, which is shame on you, but we're going to do it anyway. The idea there was basically, it was exactly what you think, like what the Matrix was, except you didn't have to be plugged in. They could do it wirelessly, and they could do it selectively. So he broke into a building, and they put him into the Matrix, and he had this little scenario that he had to fight his way through.
Sure, probably. I was imagining something similar to like what Peter Parker was trying to get through in the Far From Home.
Oh, like a holograph
Spider-Man.
Or something.
Yeah, we're just like, there's something happening around him where he kind of perceives it as real, but there's also enough clues that he could also see through the illusion and perceive the actual reality.
In the book or the movie?
Both.
All right. Well, yes. In both, you're right. In both cases, the protagonist had some extra sense, some ability.
Peter Tingle.
He had, our Spider-Man had the Peter Tingle, and our protagonist had a very ill-defined. This is where it kind of fell apart, because one of his aspects told him, he's like, you can see through all this, boss. He's like, I can't. How?
Right. This is your forte. You talk to imaginary friends all day, but you know that they're imaginary, so you're good at knowing what's real and what isn't.
That's the best way. I never could have couched it that well, but yes, that's basically exactly what was going on.
Yep.
And once he realized that, then he could see kind of through the illusions. Like, he knew the illusion was there, that the virtual reality thing was there, but he could also physically get up and move in the real world and affect the real world, because he could also kind of see it. It sounded like there was some translucence going on, is how it was being described.
Yeah.
Now, this was...
So do you feel like that's breaking... Okay, so what we were trying to do is rate the magic system.
Right.
So we've agreed it's hard magic. Does it follow the 3 rules?
I think it follows the 3 rules right up until that last vignette, where we're talking about where he's... Not just him, but his aspects are interacting with the virtual reality environment, and the virtual reality environment is incorporating the aspects and interacting with them. That's where it starts to break down for me, because now we're talking about like this. It's very ill-defined technology that's making this happen. Stephen Leeds is hard magic. We know how he works. This virtual reality thing that is somehow a two-way communication with his brain, so that the computer is also seeing these aspects and then incorporating them into the scenario somehow. That's where it falls apart for me.
So I don't know. It's almost like there's a 4th rule. And Sanderson's, these are his rules. He knew what he was doing when he did this. But I think you set up the limitations of your magic system. You utilize those to create the tension in your story, and you follow those so that you follow the rules that you've given instead of introducing something new. But when you do introduce something new, if you decide to, you have a good reason to do it. And I think that's what he was doing here.
Yeah, that's rule 0. That's the rule of cool.
Yeah.
If it's awesome, you can break the rules to make it happen.
Mark Rosewater says that in Magic the Gathering, in designing Magic the Gathering, he's like, we have these rules we always follow except for when we don't, because it's cool.
So I'm going to say this, like where I land on hard versus soft is I'm going to say Stephen Leeds and his psychology is hard magic. The technology that they introduce in these 3 different stories, I think those are soft magic.
Yeah. Okay, so we could probably go back to the second one now, although I didn't find this one as gripping as the others. In fact, I'm almost completely forgotten it already.
I thought this one was really interesting. Well, but I'm a computer scientist,
so
that makes sense. The idea here is that it's a biotech firm that is using the human body as a computer. Like their end goal is that they want to somehow recode microorganisms, like biotechnology, to be information processing equipment. And they start with the very basic level, and that is just storing information on via biological means. And what they're doing is that they have some process where they can inject something into you or expose you to something that can rewrite some of the useless strands of your DNA that don't really matter or do anything with data, information that is useful to us at this high level, and just kind of encode it into your DNA so you can pull it out later, like kind of a digital storage device built into you.
And anyone that's seen Jurassic Park is kind of familiar with this idea already. That all right, we got all this DNA that we need to use to make a dinosaur, and there's some gaps in it, and we don't know what those gaps do, so we'll just insert some lizard DNA here, and we'll still have a dinosaur.
Well, and like the idea is, I don't know how much of this is based in fact, but from the very little that I understand, is that a lot of DNA is redundant and unnecessary. Like there's huge swaths of it that don't really mean anything.
I would say that we just don't understand it.
That's probably a better way to say it.
We've actually stumbled into an area which I have a little pocket of knowledge, and I'll tell you why. My youngest sister has cystic fibrosis. And cystic fibrosis is at its heart a defect in your genetics. It's a recessive genetic disorder that happens when 2 of your alleles, one recessive from your father and one from your mother, get passed to you, and you have both, and then it causes, basically at its most fundamental level, a really simple malfunction in the proteins in your cellular membranes that has all kinds of bad effects on the human body. It makes you have really bad respiratory function, it makes you sterile, it makes you not be able to digest your food, but at its very basis, all it is in the cell membrane, the proteins that are supposed to transport chlorine in and out of cells don't work right. So in trying to treat the symptoms of this and in trying to come up with a cure for it, one of the areas that the science has really gone full speed ahead into is researching viruses that by their nature splice in genetics into cells, which is kind of what they were getting at with this technology.
Right.
So basically what they're trying to do is engineer a cold that you could infect someone who's has the genetic defect of cystic fibrosis that would go into their lungs, splice in a gene that fixes this defect in their DNA that causes their chlorine transfer proteins to not function properly, and now they're cured.
Right. Eventually, after those cells reproduce and have properly working proteins and all that.
Yes.
Yeah. I get that. Like CRISPR came out, at least when I started seeing stuff about CRISPR like a couple of years ago, and it's very interesting, the advances that we're making in genetic technology. And this story is kind of leaning on that in a different way, as opposed to curing diseases. Like the company,
you're just storing information.
Right. They're trying to create biological computers, and this is the first level of it. Well, and the problem was that the lead engineer that was working on the virus to distribute this information or inject this information into people died. But when he died, he kind of left this warning like, oh, well, that's already everything that I was working on, I already released into the wild. And so they were kind of freaking out like, well, if he did it wrong, this could give everybody cancer. And so there was this looming threat of, impending doom if they didn't figure out exactly what this guy did and how.
Yeah. I don't know. This one just didn't capture my imagination as well as the others did.
I like this one. This is the one where he went on the date, And this is all right. This is a complete departure from the magic system and anything we're talking about. But I love the scene where he was at the dinner and like two of his aspects are helping him like interact with this person that he's trying to be romantically entangled with, and the third one is basically this Second Amendment nut. Like it's his imaginary bodyguard that's 100% into
special forces.
Yeah, just hardcore gun nut and just super racist. And yeah. And like the lady asked him at some point, it's like, oh, did one of your, it's like, what is one of your aspects? Oh, there's one that's, he's ex-special forces and, he's always telling me to, what is it? How did they couch it? Like, oh, he's always telling me to kill people. And then she goes,
not a good thing to say on a date.
But then she goes, oh, is he here now? And both of his other imaginary friends go, lie to her right now. And he didn't. He told her, she was like, yeah, he did, but he's fine. He's just scoping out the restaurant. And then she immediately like makes some excuse and leaves. And he's like, why did she do that? And one of his aspects of him was like, oh, I don't know. You just told her that your imaginary friend who tells you to kill people all the time showed up.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see how a normal person would be like, yeah, you're crazy. I'm out of here.
And that is
you have an imaginary friend that tells you to kill people.
Check, please. We're done here. I've seen all I need to.
So this introduces another idea I want to talk about for a minute, and that is that he didn't just make these be like super intelligent geniuses that he could talk to anytime he wanted and only get good things only when it was relevant. Like sometimes they had quirks and limitations and problems that were overpowering or problematic. And I know we don't have this psychological condition, but it made me think of something I've discovered in my marriage, in my life, about how we have aspects of our personality that are like two-edged swords.
Right. And this is kind of what you texted me about earlier in the week.
Yes.
Like, think about what are some of the aspects of your psychology. And so I had the two. I had like my hardcore, like my anger likes to drive sometimes, and I think I've solved that. And then the other one is I have very good memory for details, except when I'm trying to quote books on a podcast. Apparently it all just dumps out of my head. But that causes me to correct people and just make these social faux pas like I'm some kind of nose in my air snob about it. And I don't mean to be. I can't help it.
Well, okay, so here's where I want to go with this, though. So it's easy to imagine. So you talk about your ability to remember things and how that could be a problem sometimes. But what about the opposite, where the first one you talked about, the anger? Like, when is that a good thing?
So when is the anger a good thing? Like, I don't know. At the time, I always felt justified in my anger. Like, I can point to very specific instances where I got very angry and made decisions that had long-reaching impacts on my life. At the time, I thought were perfectly rational. This is exactly what I should be doing based on everything I know.
Okay.
But with the lens of hindsight going, man, that was really stupid.
Let me give you a theory, because I'm not saying it's always good, but it could be good sometimes. So let's say, for instance, your drive-through epiphany that now is quite beneficial to you in your life.
Okay.
If Angry Guy wasn't there, would you have even discovered that?
I mean, yeah, I guess you're right. I guess sometimes Angry Guy does poke me to question the status quo and like, why do we do these stupid things?
So I have that too, which is why when my commander was going around the room asking everyone for their opinions on whether or not we should cancel the 50th anniversary open house, I decided to go against what everyone else in the room was saying. This is
actually, I wrote this down because when you said that, I mentioned earlier in this podcast that we were going to come back and talk about this. And I'm going to point this at you. I'm going to say that is less about Angry Guy, and that is a lot more about Ben Rich being focused very, very much more on interpersonal relationships than fabricated organizational relationships. You, sir, are a very person, feelings-oriented type of guy.
All right. So I'm going to take you on a bit of a shaggy dog tale here.
Well, these are the best ones.
So I've been married for 21 years now, and my wife and I are almost like the Odd Couple. Are you familiar with that old TV show where it's like Felix and I can't remember, Ivan or whatever the other guy's name is. Anyway, one of them's tidy and fastidious, and the other one's kind of sloppy and stuff like
Yes.
that. We're like that. If you come in our room, like my side of the room is tidy and organized, and my wife's side of the room, there's like clothes on the floor and things are disorganized and stuff like that. And it caused a bit of tension at first until I just learned to chill out about it and stuff like that and just let her be her and me be me. But I was never really at peace about it until in 2016, I want to say, we went to Idaho on a family vacation for the summer. And while we were there, they had like this biblical rainstorm that brought so much water that it just flooded like the whole community. We were going to go canoeing. We were going to go kayaking that week with my wife's family and their kids. And it flooded so much that the park across the street from their house flooded to a depth where we were able to go kayaking in the park. And so I pulled the kayaks down and we went into the park and we're kayaking through the park. And the local community was so astounded by this that the local newspaper showed up and took photos of it. So I'll post a link in the show notes of me in the Southeastern Idaho newspaper kayaking in the park.
We are 2 tangent branches away from our main discussion, but please continue.
Yeah. Okay, well, I got to go one deeper. So while we were kayaking in the park, my sister-in-law comes over and says, "Hey, we have a friend and their basement's flooding and they need some help. Will you come help?" And I said, "Okay." So I kayaked over to the curb and pulled the kayak out, and we went over to their house. And all of a sudden, I'm in a perfect stranger's house, 2,000 miles from where I live, and their basement's just like pouring water in that had come into their basement through like the window wells. And I start interacting with this stranger that I didn't know, and it became really apparent to me that this was the fastidious kind of person that always keeps a perfectly neat, tidy, and orderly house.
Okay. So like you, this is your person.
Yes, exactly. This is me. And I'm interacting with this person, and she is repulsive. Like, it was driving me nuts. Like, I couldn't stand her. And
that's funny.
After, I helped her and we pulled up the carpet and stopped the leak and all that kind of stuff. And we walked away and I went out there and I'm like, man, am I glad to be away from that lady. She was driving me freaking nuts. And then I was pondering on it and I thought, is that the kind of person I wish my wife would be? Like, why do I want somebody that would keep the bedroom clean? And I realized that the same aspect of my wife's personality that makes her leave her clothes on the floor is also what makes her kind of easygoing. Those aren't two separate things. It's the other side of the same thing.
Right. It's the aspect of her personality that applies itself uniformly across all aspects of her life.
Yes. And the fact that she's like, she's not fussy. She doesn't have to have a high fashion wardrobe. She doesn't mind, if her hair's a little bit messy or something like that. Those kinds of things also go along with the fact that she throws her socks on the floor. And I can't separate them. I can't be like, well, I want somebody that keeps a tidy room, but also is easygoing and doesn't spend a lot of money on clothes. Like, they go together. And that was my epiphany. And I realized that, and it made me be so much more at peace with those aspects of my wife's personality because her great qualities are so great that it's worth it. Like, I'll just clean up her side of the room. I'm okay with that.
I find this incredibly fascinating for reasons that you're not discussing. I find this incredibly fascinating because you stared into the abyss and the abyss stared back. And what you took away from that not was this person is repulsive and I must get away from them. Is that what other people think of me? That's not the lesson. The lesson you took from that is do I really want my wife to be that way? At no point during that entire discussion did you turn that lens back in on yourself and think, maybe I just need to loosen up a little bit. No, you started talking about accepting the flaws that you perceive in your wife. That blows me away.
All right, well, she's feeling very vindicated by what you're saying right now. So now I can go on to mine, right?
Well, no, this was yours, sir. You are so psychotically organized and nitpicky that you almost divorced your wife over it. And that's the story, listeners. Everyone agree with me? That's how this went down. And you were confronted with it and acknowledged that this was a terrible thing that you didn't want to have to deal with. But instead of dude, come on. You looked in the mirror and I don't want you to be like that guy who is clearly me.
Yeah. You're right.
Killed him. That's it. It's over.
I'm dead. So I tried to identify one of these characteristics, and I didn't center on that one. Like, my wife doesn't chafe at that aspect of my personality, which is maybe why I didn't look at it that way. Like, even though I looked at this lady and thought she was insufferable, I didn't think she was like me. I'm not fastidious to the degree that she was. And my wife isn't like, oh, why are you always helping out with the laundry, or why you got to keep your side of the room so clean? It's not a source of tension, which is why I didn't go towards that. But I'll tell you something that does tend to be a source of tension. Go ahead.
Of course you're not going to reflect that upon yourself, because then that would have to admit some kind of problem with you, and human psyches aren't equipped to deal with that. But please, go ahead.
Yeah, and he even gets Freudian in the book, where he calls his three main aspects that are around all the time: his ego, his superego, and his id. But so I realized that there's one aspect of my personality that tends to chafe on my wife, and that is I have a very deep-seated sense of what I'd call stoicism. Like, tough through it when I'm injured, just keep functioning when I'm sick, keep doing things when I'm tired. I inherited it from my dad, I'm sure, but it's very, very deep rooted, and I project it onto others.
Just that old like workhorse mentality of it doesn't matter what you feel, like there's things that need to be done.
Absolutely, you nailed it, and it's very useful sometimes, but it can also be very annoying. Like, because I project it onto other people. Like, if someone else is sick, I'm like, just get up. If they're tired, I'm like, just work through it. Like, because that's what I do, and so I project it onto other people.
I try to do the opposite. Because, like, if Nicole's not feeling well, I try to overly, like, oh, well, go sit down and relax. I'll take care of all this stuff. And the reason I do that is because I want that crap paid forward. Like, if I get the sniffles, I'm going to lay up in bed and I'm not going to do anything, because I'm the biggest baby in the world when I'm sick.
Yeah, I don't get the man flu. I don't. It's deep. It's deeply ingrained.
Here's the difference, Ben. I'll still do stuff when I have the man flu and the sniffles, but I just want all the sympathy. Like, I want you to come rub my arm and be like, oh, you poor, poor dear. It's like, I know. I am such a poor dear. I have the sniffles.
So that's something that my wife is almost starved for, because I so rarely do it, that when I got hit by a car and I couldn't even sit up without help, she actually seemed to be enjoying herself, like helping me out and doing things for me.
So you can take this as a wake-up call, as like, maybe I should do some self-reflection, and like, maybe I can change one or two little things that I do here and there to improve my love language. Or you can just keep plugging along and go for year 22 with no murders in the house.
I love psychology, and I enjoyed reading this book for that reason, that he spends all this time kind of exploring the psychology and all the interesting ideas that gave me to think about and talk about, because Alicia read it at the same time, and we had lots of good discussions that came out of it.
Cool.
Did you get Nicole to read this one?
Nicole did read this one. Like, she's actually really good about reading things that we recommend on the podcast and actually listening to the podcast. But it's very rare that I can engage her in a discussion about these things. And I think she's trying to spare my feelings, because I have such strong feels and I get so deep into these stories. And she knows that if I ask her, if I go sit on the edge of the couch and I look into her with my big doe eyes and like, sweetheart, what did you think of this amazing book that I love? And she goes, meh.
I didn't like it.
If she does that, then she knows she's going to hurt my feelings. And so she just doesn't.
Yeah. And if you'd ask me that, like, meh. If there's more books in the series, do I want to read them? Nah, I'm not anxious for it. I'm not going to seek them out. Maybe if it wins another poll on the podcast, I'll read them at some point in the future.
Well, I will say, like, all of this set aside, I am a big fan of our listeners siding with me to read some quality fiction.
All right. Well, I guess I need to. I guess I need to dig up some more listeners that are like me. But as you've proven quite conclusively in this, I'm not very good at introspection.
I think we really need to push our wives for this. And like, ladies, I know you're listening, but I'm going to pretend you're not. Ben, we need to work on our spouses outside of the podcast, because I think there is people would be willing to really like give to hear a discussion about us without us in the discussion. Like, if Alicia and Nicole just discussed how psychotic we were, for half an hour, I think that'd be a hilarious discussion.
I think it would also become apparent how they're complimentary of us, because I've noticed that people that listen to the podcast that like you are more like me, and people that listen to the podcast that like me are more like you.
That's some deep stuff right there. You think we're friends? Like, is that the opposite attracts thing? Like it's like, oh yeah, I can totally see why you're friends with that guy.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know why you're friends with me. I'm such a jerk.
Well, great book recommendation. I loved it. So what grade are we giving his use of the magic system?
So we got to go with hard/soft for the magic, depending on what you're talking about.
Hard for the psychology, soft for the science.
Yes. That said, the technology marks it down. Like you get lower grades for the technology. The psychology is pretty firm. I'm going to give it a B-.
Okay, I'll concur on that one. Great recommendation. Enjoyed reading it. Also enjoyed the fact that it was only 10 hours.
Yeah, that was one of the big reasons I recommended that instead of something much, much, much longer.
I have a lot of feedback about the performance itself as an audiobook, but I think we can say that for another time. We're right about the 2-hour mark.
I'm constantly surprised at how good voice actors are. And like, if you think how hard could it be to read a book? Listen to a good voice actor read a book and like really like pay attention to them.
Because he gives all the aspects different voices.
Well, not just that, but there's like such emotional weight to different points of like dialogue that he's talking about. Like, there's no way I could convey that like gravitas and make somebody listening to just my voice feel what I'm feeling using just my words.
So this is one area in which Alicia chafes at audiobooks, why she prefers reading them herself, because sometimes she just downright disagrees with the interpretation of the voice actor.
Now, I will have to side with Alicia on that. There are, not many, but there are a handful of times when I will think to myself, that's not how I would have read that line.
So there's a famous one that's gone viral on the internet where J.K. Rowling had written in one of the Harry Potter books that Professor Dumbledore calmly walked over to Harry and said, "Did you throw your name in the Goblet of Fire?" And if you watch the scene as it's acted in the movie, the actor frantically runs over to Harry and shouts at the top of his lungs, "Harry, did you throw your name in the Goblet of Fire?"
Well, and that might have been a director's choice, like trying to make more of a seeming like Dumbledore wasn't this Deus ex machina that was just going to solve all the problems like he did in every film. Make it seem like, at least to the audience, that he was somewhat out of control.
I definitely agree with the Rowling character. It was very inconsistent with the character of Dumbledore to have him be so frantic about it.
I agree, yeah. But we are far afield if we're going to start discussing the middle film of Harry Potter.
How did we get on Dumbledore? I was just thinking about the fact that the voice actor, Oliver Wyman, that did this reading that's on audible.com, did this one scene where one of Stephen's aspects was absent and he needed their contribution, so he turned to one of the other aspects, and that aspect impersonated the missing aspect. And the voice actor, if I was reading this, I wouldn't have even thought of it, but the voice actor had to impersonate the one character impersonating the other character.
Right, and we talked about that before. And you sent me that YouTube clip of Daffy Duck impersonating
Hank
Bugs Bunny.
Azaria talking about Mel Blanc, exactly.
And you're right. Like, that is got to be one of the ultimate tests for a voice actor.
Yeah. Really difficult.
All right, Ben.
Oliver Wyman did a pretty good job with it, of Ivy impersonating JC.
I agree. Now, there's one last thing that we have to do before we can wrap up this episode. You ready?
Yeah.
Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker was terrible.